All right, good afternoon. We are going to get started with our work session. We have a long, robust agenda, so we'll make sure we get through all of that on a timely fashion. So with that, I will kick it over to Dr. Rogers so we can get started and go from there.
Thank you, Chair Swanson, Vice Chair Hershey, esteemed board members. Today's policies are being presented for discussion and initial review. As staff, our role during this time is to listen, capture your feedback and considerations or revisions that you would like to see as these policies move forward. Following today's discussion, these items will be advanced to the Policy Committee for further review, refinement, and preparation for placement on future consent agendas for approval. So the policies that are being discussed today are Board Policy 2670. We will briefly talk about 2155, 2010, 1010, 2120, 2300, and 2330. And so as we begin the conversations, we will go ahead and we will start off with Board Policy 2670. This item is a technical update to WCPSS Board Policy to ensure an alignment with North Carolina General Statute 115C-172.0. By way of brief context, General Statute requires each school district to establish a business advisory council made up of local businesses and community leaders. The purpose of this council is to strengthen the connection between our schools and the workforce by providing insight on career readiness, workforce trends, and opportunities for partnerships that support students beyond the classroom. So the only change reflected in this revision is the removal of the 0 and the adding of the 2 in the statute reference. This does not impact the intent, structure, or implementation of the policy. It is simply a technical correction to ensure our policy language accurately reflects the current statutory citation. We are bringing this forward to maintain clarity, maintain accuracy, and alignment with state law. And at this time, if there's any questions, we would answer those questions. If not, we would go ahead and move that policy forward to policy.
I'd go ahead and move that we take this to first reading.
Perfect.
Second.
So not so much about the policy, but about the advisory council. Didn't know we had one. So where does the board get to hear feedback from this council? Not in policy, I'm asking, we apparently have a business advisory council that I was not aware of.
Okay.
So I'm curious to know how we hear from them, when they meet, how often they meet, you know, because we hear from our audit committee, right?
Right, this would be under the office, this would be under Dr. Hill.
Okay.
This will be with CTE, but I can get you answers to those questions and be able to provide you the information to make sure that it's accurate.
Okay.
So one of the questions I was asked is that I'm almost positive that this has come to work sessions from Joanne Honeycutt. I might be mistaken, but it's...
I think it's been in a student achievement we've heard from, or various opportunities, but we've heard from the business community. I believe.
What I was going to ask is just that we have a lot of groups that have very similar names, and I might be confusing them, but is this the group where they had the superintendent's breakfast that comes and presents?
Yeah, at the McKinley Center, I think it is.
Yeah.
To follow up? So I am aware of that, and the way that I read this was, and I understand Dr. Honeycutt's, so yes, that I'm aware of. The way that I read this was that this was more, I mean, there's not a lot of information here in the policy, but what I thought it was, and was hoping that it was it was more of a, more holistic rather than CTE focused group of folks. But if it's not that, understood.
Well, we'll do follow-up, but I'm like you, I saw it as the CTE Business Advisory Council.
Okay.
But if there's an additional role that it needs to be taken on, we just need to have the conversation, but I just looked at it as CTE.
I know in the past, and maybe this might be to Ms. Emmons' point, we'd involve the business community in sort of an advisory group. Tom Oxholm was very influential in that, and, you know, there could be a role for that in some projects we're actually working on.
So we're clear, fine with this one going to the next board meeting since it's just a technical revision for first reading.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chair. So the next policy is 2155, authorization of the superintendent to act for the board. And as a result of the conversations that we've had, I would go ahead and allow you to go ahead and talk more about it, or the board attorney can speak to it as well.
I'm going to defer to our board attorney, Mr. Malone.
So this policy dates back to the 80s, and my guess is that this policy existed before the board adopted more comprehensive policies on contract approval. And given that it's limited to real estate contracts and your other policies generally define how that process proceeds, and all of these come back to the board for approval anyway, I don't see the need in bringing that policy from the old manual into the new manual, and I think it would be okay to just rescind it. That's my recommendation.
That works. Sorry. go
Just to get clarification, so I understand you're saying it shouldn't be migrated to the new manual, should be removed from the old manual?
That's what we talked about, is just having it rescinded from the old manual also, yes.
All right.
So, sorry, let's just backtrack to the business, because I think Chris did make Mr. Hagerty made a motion to move forward this with the, you're right, and then Vice Chair Hershey seconded, and then I forgot about it, so.
It's tricky because in work session, we typically don't vote, but because we're acting sort of as a policy committee, the whole, we should have a vote. So the chair is yours to call the vote, I would argue.
Sorry, say that again. I was
So
thinking in my head. That's what I was trying to
I'm supporting the decision to call a vote, even though customarily we don't in work session.
Right.
I think here it's merited.
Okay, so we can, okay, so we'll just go forward with that. So the motion and the vote is there to move this to first reading.
2670.
Yes.
2670, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, you kind of threw me off because I was not prepared for motions. It was just, because we don't do this in work session, it was giving a thumbs up, make the move, but we'll abide by that. I think that's what the vice chair was saying as well. All right, so any other discussion on this one before the motion's been called? It's been moved and probably second. Any discussion on this one? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the motion to move this to first reading, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Go to first reading. So now we can go to policy 2155. We've heard Mr. Malone's point. Mr. Hagerty.
Based on Attorney Malone's points, I would move that we do not migrate 2155 to the new policy manual, and we rescind it from the old manual.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for that. The motion's been by Mr. Hagerty, seconded by Ms. Edmonds. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of it, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. This one has been rescinded, so we will move forward to the next one.
So the next policy is 2010, Board and Superintendent Relation. This policy establishes the foundation for how the Board of Education and the superintendent work together to effectively lead the district. As part of this revision, the first paragraph includes a technical update, replacing the word "to" with "of" for clarity. In the second paragraph, additional language has been included to affirm that the superintendent must report all information required by law to the board, reinforcing transparency and compliance. The final revision strengthens consistency and communication to the public by adding a requirement that the superintendent provide notice to the board when making certain communications related to legislation, related to policy, or related to political issues. Collectively, these updates do not change the core intent of the policy, but rather enhance clarity, transparency, and alignment in how we operate and communicate as a governance team.
Any discussions or questions, Mr. Hagerty?
So I'm just going to be blunt. I don't like this policy. I think it's kind of a nanny policy, in that I think it was motivated by boards that don't trust their superintendent. But there is an advantage to, I guess, knowing when the superintendent is being called to speak at an official public meeting. Mr. Chair, I have a question for the superintendent, if I may.
Sure, go for it.
So the second part of this, in addition to speaking, in a public meeting, has the superintendent shall also keep the board informed when he or she has been, quote, asked to comment on proposed or pending state legislation and policy. That seems like that could cover 100 different situations.
Absolutely. And so I was thinking the same thing, that I will get calls from legislators all the time asking my opinion about particular legislation. There can certainly be some times that I'm called to speak on a panel about something. And so, if that were the case, I probably violated that policy 1,000,000 times. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a follow-up?
I'll defer to policy chair.
No, you're just making me laugh. Do you see?
I do. That's
And we
exactly.
did not have this discussion prior to. That second part, because I could get behind the speaking in a formal way to the commissioners, the legislature, et cetera, and it specifically says, or other governmental entities. But I was like, I don't need him to tell me every time WRL calls to ask for a comment about the Parents' Bill of Rights or what have you.
And that's what I see there, where, if I'm speaking with the commissioners, if I'm speaking at the General Assembly, or when we have a legislative day, those kinds of things that you want to keep your board updated on. But all the other things that could happen in between, I don't think, the policy, I don't know if it was intended to do that or not, but I think we would agree that that might be a little overreach.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. Edmonds? Because
I actually have a motion.
I want to hear from Ms. Caulfield, and then I'll come back for your
Sure.
motion.
I agree. I was just going to say, if we put in legal before the word policy, would that change the effect of how it's reported back to us? So basically leaving it to only when it's important to our decision-making.
Good work. Any other discussions or thoughts on Ms. Caulfield's proposal?
I don't know what she means.
The very last three words, so where it says or policy, legal policy, so it just leaves it to state legislation and legal policy.
Did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I would cut the entire last sentence. In addition, the superintendent, I would just cut the whole thing and delete it. It's so broad.
Yeah, because that second sentence doesn't really even define who you're talking to.
Right.
So.
It could be a parent.
It could be a school, it could be a principal, it could be hundreds of situations. But if they're representing the district to a government body, then, it might be nice to have that notice, don't you?
Right. And that's the thing that I see with that first sentence. It really does define those entities and governmental bodies, and I would agree that is where you want to be informed. But the other, I think, would be great, so I think that would be a good correction.
Now, just for further clarification, when it says other governmental entities, how often do you get contacted by, employees at the North Carolina Department of Education or the State Board of Election or even other school districts?
So, when I think of other entities, 90% of the time it's going to be a municipality if I come out and do something of that nature. Obviously, I think the State Board of Education, that's listed there, you get to come out to that, but I wouldn't say that there are, I don't think I've had any instances that I've been asked to come and speak to an entity that wasn't something here or a municipality in Wake County. I mean, those events will probably come, but I haven't had any for a governmental body outside of Wake.
Thank you. So are we fine with Ms. Caulfield?
So if the red, is that from staff or legislature?
That's in the original.
School board.
School Boards Association.
All rules from staff.
So what it says above the last sentence kind of really covers what the last sentence is saying, right? So if we remove it, we're still getting notified of anything important. So I agree to remove it.
I do have one concern about the first sentence of that paragraph. Just when, I would add like when possible to notify in advance, because there could be times when you're called up and you're asked to meet with a group on really short notice, and
If the governor calls you at 6:30, 5 PM, are you going to put the governor on hold to call all the board members?
so I feel like we can just add language that, if possible, or something to that effect, that it's not so rigid that we're getting in the way of your meeting. I mean, if you notified us after, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't personally care as a board member, like, oh, he was in front of this committee today, cool.
Oh, actually, let me, taking a closer reading, if we strike that last sentence as we proposed, the first sentence only is as called upon to speak before those units. It's not about asking to comment.
But I mean, I
So-
don't know if there's a situation that comes up, an emergency situation, say, can you come?
Oh, okay.
I mean,
I was just thinking, it didn't, it would have included the example I thought of.
Things. Yeah.
Right, like someone calls and they want to
Right.
comment, because we've taken care of that. So you probably could get some advance notice, but yeah, there's always a chance that,
So I think this one could, based on the conversation, I don't think there's a good spot. We can send this over to policy to tighten it
To
up,
tweak.
fine tune it, do what needs to be best, because the goal is just to get everyone to lay eyes on it here, send it to policy, and then let the policy committee fine tune it and go from there.
Fine tuning there.
Just one quick thing, the last sentence says to keep the board informed. The first one is to let us know that he's going. So I think you could probably combine that
Yeah.
into the first sentence, just to keep the board informed somewhere in the verbiage.
so Mr. Chair, what I'd like to do is I'd recommend that we, what's the word, transfer
we can just-
over to the policy committee for further
That's fine.
consideration.
That works.
Refer, that's it, refer the policy.
Since the rest of these are going to policy, I don't want to keep entertaining motions, just give a thumbs up, because the motion really threw me out of my element.
Sorry about that.
'Cause I had a great plan. It's like being a teacher. When something throws you off, you keep it fine-tuned. So this one, policy 2010, will go to the policy committee on the agenda that Ms. Edmonds feels best for, so we'll send that one on. The next one is, that is
10-10.
10-10. Sorry, we're trying to keep this timeline. I think Dr. Robertson only gave us 10 minutes for these, which we're just laying eyes on it. So policy 1010 is board duty and board authority and duties. So, Dr. Robertson?
Yes, sir. Board Policy 1010 outlines the authority and responsibilities of the Board of Education as the governing body of the district, including its role in setting direction, adopting policy, and ensuring accountability for student outcomes. As part of this revision, language has been added to clearly state that the chair of the board speaks on behalf of the Board of Education. Additionally, item number 1 reflects a strong recommendation for the North Carolina School Board Association, clarifying that boards have an explicit duty to provide a sound basic education consistent with Leandro versus the State of North Carolina decision and subsequent statutory guidance. These updates further strengthen clarity around the board's role, around the board's authority, and a unified voice in governance.
Yeah, that one. Yep.
I'll defer to the policy chair first.
Well, I'll go, yeah.
Yeah, this one kind of made me laugh. However, at the Exit Issues Forum this morning, Attorney Ann McCall, who is an expert on the matter, said that Leandro rulings 1, 2, and 3, or Leandro cases 1, 2, and 3, are still in place. So I think it is appropriate to leave this in, as much as it stings.
I don't think we had an option of not taking it out because it was a recommendation from the School Boards Association.
So not to contradict you, Mr. Chair, but just because it's a recommendation of the School Boards Association, right? We have lots of examples where we might want to go in a different direction. I wanted to offer two thoughts, and maybe if it's something that goes into policy committee. The blue language, the chair of the board speaks on behalf of the Board of Education. I wanted to know your thoughts about adding, and may designate other board members to represent the board as appropriate, just because there's oftentimes where you can't be everywhere at once, and the vice chair has to go and represent.
That is fine.
Okay. And then, I also had some heartburn over the language regarding Leandro for some of the reasons stated by Ms. Edmonds. And no offense to Attorney Malone, I was hoping that Mr. Ramey, who worked on the case, might be here, because I spent a good part of the afternoon reading that Hoke case and trying to find out exactly what the disposition of the original Leandro decision is in regards to defining that sound basic education. Because one of the chief items that was debated in all the court cases was the meaning, that original Leandro meaning, and something that the courts have said in their recent rulings, including this last one, was that if you read the original Leandro case, the definition of providing that sound basic education was full funding of the BEP, the State Basic Education Plan, which doesn't exist anymore, right? And so even though we all know the spirit of Leandro and how it's been held up as establishing and defining the qualitative right to that free education provided for in the North Carolina Constitution, the actual definition is provided in the original decision may not actually be current or up to date. And I just wanted to get legal counsel and advice on that before we approved it.
So this one can also go back to policy. The goal is just for everyone to lay eyes on them, get decisions, thoughts, and so therefore when it goes to policy, the conversation has there's more meat to the bones of the policy. Any other discussions on this one?
Just get rid of the
So, one note that the School Board Association did make, I did talk with counsel, I'm not legal counsel, is that General Statute 115C-47, number 1, does say that local boards now have an explicit duty to, quote, provide students with the opportunity to receive a sound basic education and to make all policy decisions with that objective in mind, including employment decisions, budget development, and other administrative actions.
That's actually an amendment I had kind of written out. I didn't go that far. I just had as defined by North Carolina General Statute 115C to try to give some definition to what that sound basic education was. But that's something we can talk about in policy. I don't want to hold aside.
I will make that revision for us to discuss in policy committee.
And Dr. Robinson, our next one?
Next one is Board Policy 2120, which outlines the ethical standards and expectations that guide how board members conduct themselves individually and collectively in service to the district. It emphasizes integrity, it emphasizes professionalism, it emphasizes respect for governance roles, and a commitment to acting in the best interest of all students while maintaining public trust. This policy is being presented for discussion as it relates specifically to Section B9 and B10. At this time, I would defer to the board chair to provide additional context and to provide facilitation for the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. So for this particular one, I spoke with Attorney Malone about this, and so I know the state statute states that ethics trainings are required upon your election or a year within that, but I wanted to at least explore with this policy, setting the tone a little bit sharper or higher, of ensuring not just going above what the state statute says, not conflicting it, but just saying that perhaps we should have ethics training annually versus the 2 or 4 years, since that's what term limits are now. So therefore, things change within that 4 years or whatever. So therefore, the options there, we are holding ourselves to high standards because our educators have to get their ethics and trainings and all that stuff taken care of annually. So trying to mirror that was something I wanted to bring forward. Mr. Agnew?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I support that, and I was looking at lines 9 and 10. 9, comply with the statute by earning the required 12 hours of training every 2 years, and then 10, earning 2 hours within 12 months of election, and again, 12 months after each subsequent election. To your point, that's 4 years now between that training, and so I didn't know if you wanted to amend it to make it an annual or biannual, or what your thought was in terms of timing.
So annually would have been great, but I did not want to conflict with that kind of statute, so I don't know if we could drop down. That was the concern, is how do you, if the state statute says this, and we want to do something above that.
Higher standard.
Yeah.
So,
There's certainly nothing that would legally prevent the board from imposing upon itself additional ethics training. The member would not be in violation of the statute if they only complied with the way it reads now, but the board can certainly, I mean, there are many policies that the board imposes upon itself that are not required by statute, so, yeah, absolutely.
If that was your recommendation, I'm definitely for that. Ms. Evans?
So I remembered discussing this as it related to, I had 7305 referenced, which is employee conflict of interest, so that must not be the right.
No, we had discussed that during that policy meeting, and then this one was coming forth, and so I had kind of combined the two.
Yeah. No, I was just expressing that I was supportive of the intent, as you discussed it with me, that we should, hold ourselves accountable in a similar way that we do staff, so. That was from a February meeting, policy meeting, according to my notes.
So I'm happy to, let Dr. Crane and Ms. Evans kind of come through with some language to put that there. If anyone was okay with that?
so to policy committee.
Awesome.
So we're going to add 2 hours of ethics training, or just, you want each time it to be 2 hours?
So I know, well, the 12 hours, just the 12 hours in the ethics annually versus that 4 years.
2 hours annually?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and I'm just having notes for Neil. All right.
All right, Dr. Crane is going to take us through 2300 and 2330.
As you've seen thus far, anything in red is a North Carolina School Board Association recommended revision, and anything in blue was recommended sort of as a general recommendation when considering all the School Board Association recommendations. So we're going to do board meetings first. School Board Association recommends that we put in types of meetings include specially called meetings, and that is added and it's further defined and clarified below on page 2. So that is the first revision on page 1. On page 2, there's a recommendation to consider for regular meetings that any item on the consent agenda could be removed by request of a member and then placed on action if notification is provided to the board chair by the superintendent by 12 noon on the Monday of the scheduled board meeting. This is to allow staff the notification and time to be present and prepared for that on the action agenda. On letter C, for emergency meetings, we've revised some language to reflect what's in the specially called meeting section below. So it is so that in consultation with the board attorney, the chair or the vice chair, if the chair is not available, instruct the following clause, or superintendent shall call an emergency meeting when it is determined the meeting is necessary. Then in section D, the specially called meetings, there's an addition of a section 1, specially called meetings generally. that they are scheduled, may be scheduled between regular meetings of the board. This includes work sessions, retreats, public hearings, or specific types of specially called meetings, and those are set out below. The board chair or the vice chair, if the chair is not available, or the superintendent may call special meetings when necessary to conduct business that cannot reasonably be handled at regular meetings. And I think that last sentence then is not needed at all. The board chair or superintendent may call a special meeting. We can just cut that out at all, because that is what the sentence above says. We may need to do some revision in the next paragraph, because some of the language does not reflect the language that has been revised above. And then the only other revisions are renumbering of public hearing panels, and then the legal references for that policy.
And I know Attorney Malone and I had some discussions about parts of this. I don't know if it was at this policy or was it the next policy, Attorney Malone?
In this one, it was primarily the deletion of the last sentence that Dr. Crane just mentioned. The board chair or superintendent may call a special meeting, because it's kind of covered already. And then as drafted, I think we were otherwise okay with this particular one.
So a couple of pins will start. The vice chair is called Phil, and
So in this language, I'm wondering why we say the chair or vice chair if the chair is unable or unwilling to act. I don't love the unwilling part, but why do we reference that here as opposed to every other time we reference something that the chair is responsible for?
All right, I'm sorry.
So we say, because I don't know why it's just not kind of standard throughout, because if the board chair is on vacation or whatever, everything falls to the vice chair anyway. So I'm kind of wondering why we spell it out specifically for this, but not every other time the board chair is referenced. I feel like it should just be, yeah, right? So if the board chair is not available, goes to the vice chair or a designee, for everything, so we don't have to keep saying it, or so it's consistent.
I certainly think that is a possibility. Let me real quick look at that policy real fast. Yeah, we did actually discuss that without that language, if I were to receive a call, I would interpret the regular policy to say that if the chair is unavailable, that 2210 duties of vice chair, in the absence of the chair, the vice chair of the board will assume all rights and responsibilities of the chair and will perform other duties assigned by the chair. So I do think that without the language added in, that your regular board policy 2210 would allow that. So I certainly, if the board preferred, would not object to the deletion of or the vice chair, if that were the preference of the board.
Yes.
should there be a reference of that previous policy so there's some consistency there?
So I would add one clarifying point on this particular policy, just so we can be clear. So I do think that the reason that the school board's policy says unable or unwilling to act, and I just hope you will take this in the spirit in which it's described, that there are certainly situations that we have seen across the state where the chair, for whatever reason, has been unwilling to call a board meeting and is not unable, but is unwilling. And the idea in having the policy allow the vice chair to hear from the majority of the board that may want to have a meeting that the chair is unwilling to call is to create that option. If you were to do this and the chair is available to call the meeting but refuses to call the meeting, then the majority would have to turn to the superintendent and kind of ask or force the superintendent to call the meeting. So there is a reason, and politics is an interesting thing, and that is why the school board's language says unable or unwilling. And I think that is why the vice chair is specifically called out in this policy, at least in that first part, is to deal with the unable, or really more the unwilling than the unable. And I just think that's an important point for you to think about as you ponder this change, because, I mean, we have literally had this occur multiple times across the state. It doesn't happen.
Not here.
Not here. Not here.
The former chair and I did not have this discussion or issues, and the current vice chair and I don't have that either. Ms. Caulfield, and then I'll go with Ms. Evans, and then Dr.
Yes, I was looking at item number 6 where we added the blue language. And I was going to ask if we could remove that, because we don't receive our information assembly until Friday evening. And some of us do work in the evenings and at night, so, and on the weekends. So sometimes Monday is your only day to catch up. And if you're limited to only 12 o'clock noon, that does not give you a whole lot of time to review a heck of a lot of documents before Tuesday's meeting.
Well, I'll ponder on that one. I hear what you're saying. I'll ponder. I have a response, but I'll wait. Unless others have a response to that.
I mean, I do, but I don't want to jump ahead.
Same. But did anyone, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Dr. Job and saying the same thing. My brain is.
That's okay. No, I might be confused by the language. This is just pulling something we already have and putting it in action items, or does this also allow us to add something new?
So not to add anything new, like if you want an item that is on the agenda,
Right.
that item could be pulled, but that item should not, at least I know it was a practice when we joined the board, that pulling something would require notification to the superintendent, Ms. Allen, and the chairs at the time. So therefore, staff could be prepared to know that I need to be able to present this item. So that is why that language I was
But
writing.
but the documents wouldn't change or anything usually, right?
It would just go from action to consent.
So like we should have read it already anyway, right?
Essentially, yes.
Right, but if it's on consent, there's no discussion if you want to take it to an action item to speak about it.
Right.
And that's where Robert's rules come into order. So Robert's rules also states that you need and our policy says that you need two persons, one person to support, two persons to support your items being moved from action to consent or vice versa. But the other part told us to ensure that staff had enough time to do their due diligence. Ms. Allen and her team, now she has a team with Ms. Wills joining, being prepared and not being in a situation where they don't know and we're all scrambling at the table. So it's to give some consistency, and so the superintendent can allow staff to say, be prepared to present your item ABC thing. So it's a courtesy thing, and that's really the
And I
most.
think that was the intent, that if there was an issue that you wanted pulled, that staff would have an opportunity to be able to be prepared to, to address whatever issue may come up. I think the other part that you may have to consider is, you don't want discussion, you just want that removed so you can vote no on it. I think that would be different than wanting the staff to be prepared to have discussion. So,
And we've seen that in my tenure here on the board, is voting it down and just saying why, or voting it down and not saying why. So it's nothing new to that, but Mr. Henry?
Thank you. So originally, when I saw this, I had some concern, but I think that there's remedies that we already have under Robert's rules and other parliamentary procedure for how we could look at this. This applies specifically to the consent agenda, and if you read it, it's only removing from the consent agenda and then place on the action agenda to go to the board or committee. I was thinking about situations where between the time that the agenda is finalized and the board would vote on something, there's new information, right? Sometimes information comes up, it's posted publicly, but then the public will come back and raise something about an issue that maybe we didn't have, awareness of over the weekend or maybe even Monday morning. So we might have thought, okay, we don't see anything that's troubling, but then a constituent calls you and has an issue they raise. Then I thought about situations that sometimes occur where there's nothing on here that really restricts staff from adding things to the agenda. And that can be a concern where, there's a deadline for publishing things on the agenda, but sometimes things are added or things are sort of slipped in. And then I also saw the situation where, sometimes depending on where we have agendas, we've had information items where staff has shared information that the board in their reaction to it might then have been inconsistent, like with a policy. Remember the policy that we had on the CNS issue, where the consent agenda recommendation was different than the direction the board is providing. But, having said all that, Robert's Rules of Order, as you cited, gives all of us a remedy, which is rather than simply objecting to the item, you can simply make a motion to amend the agenda, which is oftentimes what we end up doing anyway, rather than using this section. And, it just simply, if you have good cause, like say that CNS issue, then it just takes a motion and a second and a majority. And then in that situation, you had a majority of the board that thought, now that we've heard this presentation, we may not want to consent to the policy. So we just had the motion and we're able to move it that way. That also allows you to change the agenda if you had a speaker scheduled and something came up and they can't present, or the meeting ran very long and you wanted to move something to another meeting. So I think within Robert's Rules of Order, we have some very good tools we can use to handle those emergency situations. And this is just the objection by one member. And they can still do that and still make that request up until that time. So when I first read it, I had some real concerns about it. But then in kind of going through all the scenarios and thinking what we've done in the past, we've usually found a way to deal with it just by doing it by motion.
Correct, but it's also a way so staff is not surprised, because you never want your superintendent or his staff to be surprised when the agendas are published on Fridays at 5. And I get it, all of us have jobs. I divvy up the materials over the weekend and then learn. But I mean, we were elected to do our homework, and that's what the people would allow us. And so I would object to that language being removed, because I think it's just a way of ensuring that there are we're not surprising staff for our lack of piece. But I do agree with the piece that you raised, Ms. Hager.
Follow up. So we're doing staff until 5 o'clock on Friday, and then we can't say anything after 12 o'clock on Monday.
Well, staff has a deadline of Thursday of when they have to put their stuff in. And the public and the board gets it on Fridays.
Tonight.
Well, it's whenever you choose to check your email, but it's 5 o'clock. Is it 5 o'clock, Ms. Allen?
For the public, and it's
Or-
for the board.
Right, so I know,
Unless something has happened, the staff doesn't have those in, and
Right.
they can't control that.
so
And that's that issue.
yes.
That is.
So I know that the reason
They don't give it.
The reason I bring that up is because I know this conversation has happened in the past. If we could move that up to Thursday, giving us more time to review all the documents.
Well, the problem is staff, and I know when Chair Hager was here, and we had this discussion, but the problem is when staff has a deadline of Thursday at 5, and they have tweaks, you can't then release things when the agenda's not completely there. But as is germane to this policy, it's just making sure that board members, if there is an objection and you want things pulled or whatnot, there's processes to that. Robert's Rules is the best option, and then the policy just supports the Robert's Rules because we govern based off of that. So I know we have quite a bit, and I think the discussion has gone on longer than the 10 minutes, so we can go with this one back. Ms. Edmonds?
I don't support item 6, the way that it's written, and I would request that in policy committee, that we work on language to try to compromise, because I do understand the intent of, I don't think anybody on this board has a desire to surprise staff or the superintendent, and certainly not to disrupt what Ms. Allen takes a lot of time and energy to put together. But I know that in work session, we have learned things or discussed things that may change what we want to do with the consent agenda. I understand what the points that have been made about Robert's rules, but I would like for the policy committee to try to work with this language to find a happy medium.
There's no objection with that. It's going back to the committee to do just what you've suggested. It's just going through, and I can send some different language too to make sure that the compromise there's a compromise. Because I do think that it's important that there's something here that does that, but I think we have to figure out what that looks like, so I'm happy to do some digging and figure it out. Audrey?
Yes, thank you. Actually, 2 points. First, in response to, that's item 6. The way that it's read, if anybody is requesting something to be pulled out of consent to action, is it automatically done without question, or it has to be approved by the board chair? It doesn't say what happens after that. It just says that it will be placed on the action agenda. But there is still a process involved in that, from the point of request to the point of actually on Tuesday.
Right. And so I can speak on some of the things when we joined in 22, when Ms. Mahaffey was chair, and there was an item that may have been discussed at the work session, and when Mr. Harvey was vice chair, I was an email saying, hey, I would like for this item to be removed from action to consent, or consent to action, so there could be more dialogue. And the superintendent, Catty Moore, was on that email, and so staff was prepared to know, as well as Ms. Allen. So it was just a common courtesy thing. That was kind of where I was going with this, find some common courtesy so folks aren't surprised at the table or trying to figure out why this piece is being voted down or whatnot, so people can at least explain it and go forth with it. But the committee can figure out how and what that process is.
Yeah, that's just a point for Ms. Edmonds to consider. And then in regards to the previous discussion about the chair and the vice chair role, I think there was a lot of, in letter D, second paragraph, that language about unable or unwilling to act, I mean, I heard all about that, but then the previous paragraph, I think there was the addition of language did not use that same type of language about the vice chair, was more about, the chair or the vice chair if the chair is not available. So there was some inconsistency there. So I'm wondering, for the sake of brevity, whether it would be better to have like a paragraph in the beginning that summarizes what a vice chair should do in the case, and then just kind of simplify the language so there's no confusion in the subsequent paragraphs.
Yeah, there's a way we can draft that.
Yeah.
So it's clear that this was going to the policy committee to do some work.
Can I ask a question, just for my email to Neil? Is there an interest in having language that would allow you to pull it from consent without discussion if you just want to vote against it at the meeting? Because I could see that someone may just want to vote against an item. But, and if there's no discussion, then there's no inconvenience to staff. If you pulled it with the understanding that there'd be no discussion, but you just want to vote against it. Someone mentioned that, and I've been pondering that as I was sitting here.
With Robert's rules, there's always times for discussion. When the motion has been moved and properly second, there's an opportunity for a discussion to take place there.
Oftentimes, when I was chair, we just handled all this through parliamentary procedure. So if you had a question like that, you would move to divide the question, divide the motion, and then just do it separately. We didn't really rely on policy. This is the first time when we got it today, when we were talking about it, that I really kind of went through it. But oftentimes, we accomplished everything just using parliamentary procedure. So I think you could do it outside of policy, but if you wanted to have it in policy, you could. We just have to figure out the way to do it.
I mean, I think the difference is that a single person currently can pull it from consent. And the question would be is, whatever, right before the meeting, can a single person say, I'd like to pull it from consent, not for discussion, but so I can vote against it for whatever reason that you decided that you want to vote against it. So there wouldn't be discussion on the, anyway, it's just something to consider for the policy committee. Maybe I'll just make a note for Neil.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to the committee to figure out some language, but, I mean, Robert's rules is very clear. I just advise folks to learn it and govern it accordingly. So we can go to the next policy.
Thank you, Chair. Next, we have Policy 2330, Board Meeting Agenda. In blue, you will see recommendations to be included within the policy. This policy is already part of the new manual, but at this time, I will defer to the Board Chair and to the Board Attorney with regards to 5 and 6.
I saw your hand.
I was going to comment on what you were.
Gotcha. I think with that one, it's kind of the spirit of the same policy, and so clearly there was some uneasement with this language, and this will be going back to the committee as indicated. So we can send both of those back to kind of get some teeth and clean it up is what's needed. So those are my comments. I'll go to you, Mr. Hershey. I'm Vice Chair Hershey.
Is it standard that any board member can pull an item completely from the agenda?
That's the one that the chair and I discussed
Because I don't
earlier.
think that's a great idea without, I mean, you can be pulling it, one person then controls the whole
Yeah.
agenda,
That was the one that
not
we
the will of the board.
Well, that's the one we discussed striking. So what we discussed is that we
You don't have
would
to say anything
not,
else, I
Right, we-
respect that.
that I don't think the chair is still recommending item 5. I think that we're only recommending the change to what is now item 6. Correct. And that item 5 would not go forward, because a single board member being able to pull items off the agenda, even with notice, could be very problematic.
And that violates Robert's rules because you just can't pull anything without a second. So
Right. Yeah, I just think that one, number 5, should be removed from the recommendation as it goes forward to policy committee.
And again, just to the chair's point, there are things that we do by policy, there are things that we do by procedure and parliamentary procedure, and one of the fundamental underpinnings of parliamentary procedure has to do with the right of the body, right? And you never want, like, a smaller group to be able to restrict the rights of the larger group. So, like, when there are motions to cut off debate, those usually require 2/3 rather than just the majority, because the ability to discuss and debate things is seen as being very, very important. Likewise here, you know, it's one thing to want to make a change to an agenda, and if the majority of the board wants to change an agenda item, you know, they can discuss it and they can advocate for it. But the potential for abuse that Mr. Hershey raises, if you look at our typical, like, consent agenda, you know, no one on this board would do this, but, you know, hypothetically, it's possible someone could object to every single item and then force a vote on every single item and then delay the meeting, really for the purpose of delay of going, like, you know, item 1, item 2, item 3, like 30 different things, and really create a disorderly environment, which sort of gets rid of the whole notion of a consent agenda. So there are things that we've managed through other processes. You know, when I think even if we pass the policy, we still have parliamentary procedure as a way to remedy it. But, you know, I'll save it for policy.
I mean, and the policy is just, it's a spirited document. So, you know, it might be a concern for this board, another board may come and say, heck with all of these policies or something. But, I mean, so it's just meeting the moment where it is. Did you have a question, Ms. Caulfield?
No, I was just going to add a comment that, you know, I know I've commented about the after 5 on Friday, before 12 on Monday. It's also the public that gets to view that, because I've had people come to me and ask me questions and raise concerns the day of, because they reviewed it the night before, as did I. And, you know, here you are now, it's in consent. So you're either voting the entire consent agenda down, which is hundreds of documents, or you're saying yes, and you're including that because you didn't get to do anything specific with it because 12 o'clock has passed. So I'm just saying, it's not just the board, sometimes other questions may be raised. I mean, we sat in a special meeting because questions were raised just a week ago, so.
Well, it was different issues, but.
Right, but it's still a special meeting because of something that came up, and so that's just my concern, is limiting the board to actually be able to ask those questions.
So we'll come up with some language and send it to the policy committee, and we were able to, was that the last policy, Doctor?
That was the last one.
Perfect. I was looking at the clock, had a reminder set to make sure that we got through this at a timely manner so we can get to other discussions. And so I know for the 2100 series, there's a couple more policies that I've asked Dr. Robin that we could have it come before the work session. So therefore, every board member, everyone attends the work session who may not be able to make it to a policy committee meeting and want to make sure their voice is lifted up in a policy. So that will be, I think there's a couple others that you all will probably see in after budget update. And so then the regular program will start. We'll go back to the policy committee and go from there. So thank you, Ms. Evans, for allowing me to indulge in that for a moment. All right. And we will now go to the calendars, the draft calendar. So Dr. Robinson, and then we'll welcome Ms. Anderson Powell.
Thank you, sir. Board, during our last work session, the board asked to take a deeper look at the 27-28 traditional calendar and return with revised option that reflects your priorities. Specifically, you asked us to explore adjustments to teacher work days, vacation days, the structure and timing of spring break, alignment to holidays, the possibility of a day off each month, and stronger alignment to the end of quarters and semesters. So in response, we are bringing forward the original draft calendar along with 3 additional options that reflect these considerations. Each option represents a different balance of instructional time, staff planning needs, and family community impact. So our outcome is to support the board in identifying a preferred option to advance to this evening's board agenda for approval. Excuse me. And Chair, as we had talked about and discussed, we do have it on the agenda. If we can figure out if there's going to be a recommendation that the board would like to move forward, we will be prepared to upload it for the agenda tonight for approval.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Anderson Powell, for the work that you did to revise these at a very short minute notice. So thank you.
You want me to pull these up?
I think it would be good.
Okay. Let me see if I can do that.
Dr. Robinson, I guess we can start with the original.
Start with the original?
Just a quick review of the original. Have you moved through there?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So you should see in Assembly the now 4 drafts. One being the original draft that I brought on March 17th, which is just draft version 6. Just as a reminder, there's a teacher workday or a holiday in each month. This is not the original one, Dr. Robbins.
All right, which one do we have?
Look for, oh God, I'm trying to read across the room.
Bottom right.
Bottom right.
Right here?
Trying to read all the way across the room, yeah. So that one you'll note, one of the questions was we have a vacation day or an annual leave day on November 24th. We did some work maybe to switch that out in one of the other drafts. There's a teacher work day in February. There's one on March 7th, and then there's one at the beginning of spring break on that particular calendar, which is March 27th. You scroll down, there's a teacher work day on April 17th, and one in May, and then one at the end of the school year. So one of the requests from a former board as practice was to have something each month, teacher work day or holiday, something each month so that there was not one month with nothing. That was a request. And then we have now version B, which was a request to look at a way to, for the spring break in March, because it begins with the teacher workday on March 27, board members felt that that really didn't provide a great spring break. So for that option, I moved the teacher workday from April 17th up to April 3rd, which gives teachers, which is another workday kind of at the end of spring break, so that maybe that would give administrators some flexibility and teachers some flexibility. The next draft is draft C. And in draft C, the difference from the original draft is I made November 24th, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving break, a teacher workday, and swapped out the annual leave day that was on March 27th. That gave a truer spring break that week of March 27th, and I left the teacher workday on April 3rd to correspond with the end of the quarter that ends on March 24th. So those two calendars just switch around some days. The final draft was a request to consider limiting the number of workdays or a review of the number of workdays in the instructional year.
Hold on a second, Tamani. Which one is the final draft?
D, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we have it up.
Right one.
That's D, correct?
That's D, correct? Yes. So this calendar considered removing some of the other teacher workdays during the year. I left, of course, the workdays that correspond with the end of the quarter, and I did leave the 2 days, the two teacher workdays are on election day. I left those. I wasn't sure, but I felt like you didn't really want to remove those two. So you'll see there are a few less teacher workdays during the instructional year, but that does leave like February with no days out. There's one date in April, there's one date in October, there's one date in September. It can feel kind of long for school personnel. That also moved the teacher workdays outside of the instructional calendar because teachers still have to work 215 days. So now you'll see there are 5, 6, 7 teacher workdays prior to the first day for students. And thank you, Dr. Robinson, and 2 after the last day for students. So those are the different options that I shared based on your reflections at the last board meeting.
Tamani, can you do me a favor? Sure. Before you open it up to the board for questions, can you share the responses and the feedback that you were able to receive from not only staff, but from your committee as well?
Thank you, Dr. Robinson, for that. I did send these new drafts back to the committee that created the original draft, as well as the superintendent's teachers advisory council. That's it, STAC, right? Because I had already reviewed the other calendars with them, so I just wanted them to see, here are some other drafts we're taking. And you know, lots of people have varying opinions. Many really liked the idea of draft C that creates a more real spring break for teachers and having that teacher workday on April 3rd when they come back. Second, of course, you know, people were okay with draft B. Is that right? Yes. Draft B that just kind of changed, made a little change to give them that other teacher workday on April 3rd. That's kind of those are the 2 calendars that have more energy than version D. So thank you for allowing me to share that information. But I did share all of these back out with the original committee and STAC, members of STAC.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson Powell. We'll start with Ms. Evans and then go. Vice Chair Hershey. Ms. Evans?
Is there flexibility for the May 5th date? Because we have received some emails about that being a holiday for some in our community. And I know we can't accommodate every religion and culture and holiday in that respect, but it looks like there might be flexibility with that May 5th workday. I'm wondering.
I'm sorry, did you want to move it, or?
Yes, I'm asking if there's flexibility to move the May 5th workday off of the 5th, possibly to the 8th.
Is that a community, the 8th?
No, actually not Cinco de Mayo. I don't want to mispronounce. It is it's Eid, and a Muslim holiday.
And I thought it was on the,
They wanted on the 5th.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Am I reading it wrong?
Yeah, you didn't want the D calendar that got rid of it.
Right.
Right, there was a calendar that got rid of that teacher workday.
Yeah, the D got rid of it.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay.
I didn't read those communications correctly.
I was just, thank you for that.
So a question when you get feedback, and this is one for the superintendent, how big is your teacher advisory?
Probably close to 40 or 50 teachers, I think. It's really a pretty large group.
I would still welcome trying to give teachers that aren't in the other 9,000, 10,000 teachers an opportunity to weigh in on what they're looking for in calendars. I don't know if we could do a teacher survey on, are we doing too many? Are we not doing enough? How are we doing them? What do you know, just some general feedback from because I hear conflicting things from teachers. I've heard that some question why we have so many work days, some like what we have, and so I'm just wondering how we can get a wider net, especially as I feel we need to listen more to schools than we do sometimes. And also, thank you for doing this for me. The parent in me was like, I love D because my kid does get him in school nonstop, and it creates momentum. But I do understand the pros to having work days every month. But I would still like to get more voices just to make sure we're on the right path with all these calendars.
And Ms. Anderson, how does folks join your committee, if that's a way for
They
folks?
just email me and I add them. We meet virtually, and especially for traditional calendar, we meet on a teacher workday so that teachers, or anybody really, has the opportunity to join virtually. All they gotta do is email me or tell Dr. Taylor, and Dr. Taylor will tell me to add them. Yeah.
That's a way to the Vice Chair's point of getting additional folks.
And I also think when I present to STAC, typically they at least go back to their staff members, and I create a Google form that they can give me feedback.
Okay.
But typically, because it's a draft, it's out there for the public, they take it back to their schools and talk to their staff members. So while there may only be 40 on the meeting,
Yeah.
they get feedback from lots of different teachers. I mean, I'm sure we could, reach further by sharing, but I think teachers have a lot of opportunities to weigh in, number one. I think something we could do better is help teachers understand what the law says, because sometimes I get questions like someone asks, could I move January 3rd's holiday? Like, I can't do that. But often teachers don't know, this is not what they do, and they don't know. So we maybe could do a better job of helping them understand this is how many days you have to work, and here's how we divide them up, and here.
That's great.
That kind of thing. I think we could do better with that.
So Dr. Jobe and then Ms. Coffin.
Thank you so much for doing this. I like C a lot, especially for giving them the solid week for spring break. And I also want to make sure that we keep the 11th of October as a work day, because that's Yom Kippur, which is the most, which is the holiest day of the year for the Jewish religion. And I actually had a question about that. What happens when a teacher takes a work day for a religious holiday? Does that count against their personal days, or?
So how do you mean when they take over?
Well, like it's a teacher workday is Yom Kippur, but like a Jewish teacher wouldn't be working on that day. So what, do they lose a personal day for that, or?
I mean, they would take annual leave, is what I would imagine. If it's a non-required work, that,
I'm looking to somebody, I don't work in HR.
they would be able to take leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they have the time. If they're a new teacher, when you're a new teacher, you don't have the time accumulated as
Right.
veteran teachers, so.
And that is the difference, that as a new teacher, you don't accumulate any extra leave until after year 3. And
Yeah.
so that means, any work day you've got to come to. But if it's an optional work day, then they have the opportunity to take leave and not come to work.
And Ms. Gordon reminded me of a good point. If the principal has it as a protected day, you can't take leave anyway. You're required to be there. So although on this, and I think I said the last meeting when we talked about this, although it was a work day here, the principal has an obligation to say, I want to make the 11th protected, the 5th protected. So our job is just to pass whatever calendar, then the principal has the ability to determine what makes sense for their schools.
So, sorry, follow up?
Sure.
Is that a policy question that, because I'm just thinking that like, this is something I ran into when I was a teacher and apparently hasn't changed in 25 years. So if you're Christian, your most major holidays are automatically holidays, but if you're anything else, you have to use your annual leave for it. So, and it's possible that they might make it a protected day and force you to come in on the most serious holidays of your religion. Is that a policy thing? Is it how do we address that?
Dr. Robinson?
The one thing that I will share with the board, principals will not put staff in situations where they cannot respect their religion on those particular days. So although principals have the autonomy to create required days, if there's a situation such as you're referring to, they're not going to do something inappropriate to that magnitude, which would negate someone celebrating their religious holiday in their religious perspective. And I understand what you're referring to, but that doesn't happen.
But you still lose an annual leave day. And if you're a new teacher, you'd have to use what?
So the idea would be that if I'm the principal and it's a required work day, then I would work individually with a staff member and allow them to take annual leave on that day. If they're a new teacher and they don't have leave, then if they were out, it would be leave without pay is what it is. What I will tell you is that in Wake, we give principals the authority to make it a required day or not required. Every other district I've been in, it's already defined on the calendar as a required day or an optional day. And so that is some of the flexibility that we have that other districts you wouldn't see. But it is that principle that would give them the opportunity to meet their needs. But without leave as a new teacher, they would have to take it as leave without pay, even if the principal granted them the opportunity not to be there.
Ms. Coughlin?
I wanted to thank you for taking the time to give us different options. And the feedback that I got was a little bit more detailed why they like C. Because the C actually, when you gave them that Monday as a vacation day, they get the full Friday to the following Sunday. Whereas Thanksgiving gives them, they do have to come in that day, but they can still have the weekend to do what they have to do. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that. I am in favor of C. I think that kind of gives them everything. I did get feedback because people were really trying to get Christmas week, that whole winter break off, and also the spring break. But I appreciated that you explained how there's a certain amount of days, holidays, and that actually explained a lot to them. So thank you.
And I think, if I remember correctly, next year's calendar has some teacher work days prior to winter break. I could be wrong, but I think that's also happening. There's just not enough days to go around.
Right. And sometimes the holidays don't fall.
They don't fall where we want them to.
Exactly. So thank you for that.
Fine, I know there's policy that allows students if they need to, miss school for religious holidays because our calendar committee cannot, honor all the holidays, but the ones that we can. The policy gives students that ability to take those days as a unexcused absent, or?
It's policy 3510.
I was searching for this, so thank you.
Yeah, there is policy for students.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions regarding, so I guess before we go forward, I've kind of counted that there's some, but I just want to know, is there a thumbs up for options version C? It looks like version C will be the one that we will put on tonight's agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so thank you. We will go to, I don't want to jinx it because we're making great time with this agenda. We will now turn to the CIP executive summary, so we'll welcome Mr. Strickland.
So Mr. Burnett is under the weather today. Mr. Crows is here, Mr. Cooley, and I'm going to take the lead.
Great, well, thank you. And I know that I had sent an email requesting the board members give feedback to Mr. Strickland regarding the CIP, so I just want to thank Mr. Haggerty for taking instructions. And I saw the feedback and I was in line with a lot that you shared, so. All right, Mr. Strickland?
So you all have seen the CIP in its current format a couple of times prior. At the last meeting, we received a robust discussion about potential changes. We get an email about some changes that we wanted to bring back to you all. So if I'll just note with you, focus, the changes are at the very bottom of the document under the program requirements area that are cash funded. We made all of the changes in this category because the mechanics of getting the bond put together and the dollar amounts that go with it already established above the line for debt-funded projects. So it was easier for us and the county to identify areas within the cash-funded part of the CIP to make requested changes. And the changes that were made, if you look at the technology devices line item, that line item beginning in fiscal 27 was reduced by $5 million. Instead of taking that entire amount and putting it in the debt-funded account for environmental and ADA, which would have been problematic for the county, we created a new category for environmental and ADA under the cash-funded portion of the CIP. Again, this was in full disclosure with the county, and they were supportive of this. So we created that new category and added $2 million down there. So in total, that raises the available funding for that category to $3.1 million. We took the remaining $3 million and we had a lot of discussion about where we could best use it, and we felt like because in the next 30 to 60 days, we'll be bidding the first round of our security projects. We felt like we go ahead and put it in there. It is a cash-funded effort, so we put it there for now as a holding place. Once we get the bids in for those first round of projects, we'll know how the rest of them are going to go. We're hopeful it could mean that we get really good prices and we can spend more with the dollars that we get. Or if we find the opposite is true and things cost more than we thought, we'll be covered there as well. We felt that was a prudent way of adjusting the funding. And so those are the only changes that we made to the document. We've had lots of discussion about the new schools and existing schools, but again, we felt like those were some good suggestions, and be glad to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Dr. Joe?
The $5 million from technology is something, for technology devices, where did that number come from?
I'll ask Mr. Badula this. I prepped him that he may get that question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Joe, for that question. So obviously last year there was a lot of debate about finding the money from the technology devices to reallocate that to more critical needs. So since last 1 year, the team has been working on a lot of initiatives, and I'll kind of name the top 3 or 4 where we were able to sustain that $5 million. One of the key projects is the Promethean board. So we were able to accelerate that project. In fact, I think I created that a couple of months ago. We were able to finish that project. So the implementation of Promethean boards across Fayette County is completed. On an average, we used to spend about $4.5 million on a yearly basis. So that's a savings we have that. That's number one. Number two, we also reduced the number of devices we procured for the next year, with an understanding that we will be finalizing our sustainable device strategy. Remember that whole conversation we had in the month of Feb. There was a lot of feedback and everything, right? So we are actually working on that particular strategy right now, so with the goal that we will come back to the board about what that strategy is, hopefully by September, so we have enough time to really realign what we need for the following school year, which is 27-28, not just from procuring the devices what we need based on the finalized strategy, but also the change management, the communications, making sure we have enough runway for the school's adjustment. There's a lot of things we need to align, so that's pretty much where we got the money from. Now, next year, probably this time, when we talk about the CIP, we'll have the, approved device strategy, which we all know, and if we need to adjust up or down, we can still do that.
Follow-up? Where are we on getting a pilot program in place for removing one-to-one from elementary?
That is a part of the discussion right now with our academic teams and everything. There's a lot of discussion which is happening, including doing some survey for the Promethean board use. There was a lot of feedback which we got. So we are, working on those details right now.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Joe, one of the things I'll say is we want to really help everyone understand what one-to-one in elementary looks like, because when we have the conversation, it will always be the idea that we need to have a classroom set, that cow that's in the classroom. Well, that's still ultimately one-to-one. And I think the conversation that everybody understands is that we're not in a COVID setting, and we don't want these devices to be issued where kids take them home, and literally no elementary school sends K-3 devices home, and many don't even opt to do it in 4 or 5. And so it is about knowing that from that perspective, there's going to be a classroom set, but it is about how that impacts instruction. And what we don't want to see is kids on computers all the time. And if you go into elementary school, that's probably not what you're going to see, but devices are still issued, and we got to make sure that that's not the dominating thing in any individual school.
All right, thank you. So my follow-up to Dr. Joe's question is, so ultimately, are we saying that we are not looking at reducing devices until 2028, 29?
No, so academics will come back with the device strategy, what that final strategy is going to be. But, what I've heard from board members here and other people in the community is to say, instead of having one-to-one, they equate one-to-one to every student being issued a device and they take it home. And the idea is that we need to just have a computer on wheels or a classroom set. And so that's still one-to-one. It's the philosophy of not issuing devices that go home. And still there's an opportunity for classrooms at the lower grade levels to share those computers because everybody's not going to use them every day. Right now, every district has, because of COVID, leaned on we've got to issue devices so that if we've got to go remote, blah, blah, blah. That, I think, is what everybody's trying to get out of their mind. Having technology, having it available versus having it where it goes home. And that's the balance that everybody's trying to strike right now.
So, Dr. Joe, I'll come back to you, but I want to follow around so other folks can speak on this matter. Ms. Caulfield?
I was just wondering, before we had all the one-to-one, especially in elementary school, we had technology classes where our children actually got up, they worked on their social skills walking through the hallway. They, learned how to do all that. They got up, they moved, they motivated, they went to technology class, and then they came back to the school. Back to their classroom, and now they're ready to settle back into core instruction. So if we went back to that way of doing things, could you, and you probably don't have it right now, but would you be able to give us an update on how much that saves for elementary school if we went back to the way we did it before?
I don't think we can give you the number, but I think I'll let my academics team chime in, because there's a lot of models actually we're going through right now, different combinations of what. And again, there's a national debate about the screen time. We all know what's happening and everything. We also know about what's happening with the technology, especially with the whole these data centers in AI, where everybody's scooping up the technology, especially from the chipsets and memories and everything. The cost of those devices is also going up. So, and especially with the macroeconomics, what is happening around it. There's a lot of things which are kind of moving parts right now, so we're looking at those things. But going back to your question, I will let Dr. Hill, Charles is here also from academics, so if you could chime in.
Ms. Caulfield, you raise an excellent point, and please know that the work that we have in conjunction with technology as a follow-up is what is developmentally appropriate for those grade spans, and we're going to bring that back in work sessions so you can actually see those standards and those competencies that those students have to have underneath their mastery, and we're working on that to bring that to you all in a more in-depth work session so you can see that span as we go across those grade levels. Mr. Patton, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, that's right, that's what we're working on. We certainly have some details behind that, but it rapidly goes into a lot of detail for what that looks like for students developmentally, what those lessons look like, who delivers those lessons, what does that impact look like. Just so that I have clarification for further follow-up, Ms. Caulfield, your question centers around moving towards devices in one classroom that students would share by going to that classroom.
Core technology classes.
Yeah, okay. Special.
I don't know if it's one, but
Sure,
you know, we.
sure, yeah.
I'm not sure how well. So if I could add to that, one of the things I would say is that technology is embedded in a different way today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So it's just an integral part of what happens, and that is what we want to be able to educate kids on, the proper use of technology. But one of the things we're going to lean heavily on, and I don't think as a district we've done this, it is the digital teaching and learning standards for both students and teachers. And those standards don't necessarily talk about devices. It just talks about what those digital teaching and learning standards are and what we want to expose kids to. And so kids still have the opportunity to go to a technology lab to do those sorts of things. But we want all teachers and students to understand how we embed the standards in instruction every day, and the focus is not necessarily on a device or a piece of equipment.
So I appreciate the conversation that Ms. Caulfield is raising, but I want to shift this back to like very specific to CIP and the numbers. And I want to first say I appreciate the work. We really pushed the technology department to come up with some savings. They have done that to the tune of $5 million. I appreciate Mr. Strickland and his team listening to the concerns over the environmental number being too low, and we've added to that. I think that's great progress. This is when we've had a lot of conversations in facilities and facilities committee meetings for planning. What else do we do? And one thing that I feel strongly about as we are evaluating the space that we have, the land that we own versus where we are paying rent or have leases, is how do we look at programming that can be combined maybe into one building, or how do we move a program that is currently in a lease building into somewhere where we own, and making sure we're doing that. And I really want to encourage not only my board members, but staff on all levels to embrace that we have to make changes and it cannot be status quo. And as we're looking for additional savings, because you think about the savings we can take and then we put into more renovations or somewhere else, rather than paying a lease over and over again and getting caught in a 10-year lease when we're unsure of it. So I want to encourage all of staff to be open-minded. I've talked to the chair, we're talking about how do we bring this sometime, it won't be before the election, I know there's a lot going on, but after that, how do we bring this for a big roundtable discussion with board members and with staff presenting different ideas so we can choose a path when it comes to facilities, the 20-year plan, some progress we need to make in some areas. And since the chair is gone, Mr. Strickland, you had a comment?
So there have been for months, and thank you for sharing that, been lots and lots of conversations with many, many stakeholder groups around that very thing in terms of how can we tighten up the spaces that we use, how can we be more efficient because the dollars are dwindling. So there's lots of work going on right now with that, and we'll be reporting that out soon. It is interesting that sometimes the mere act of asking the question is offensive, and so lots of questions have been asked of many of our stakeholder groups. And listen, we're just trying to get better and again to tighten up, but we've tried to also leave no stone unturned. So there may be some things that only a small group of people think is a really great idea where the larger group doesn't. But we still have to ask the question. And so that's what's been going on in the last few months. And I think it's important that we'll share this information out at Chiefs or SLT first to kind of get our footing and get some criticism going there. But the homework is being done, and there's a certain amount of excitement in terms of being able to look at things new and differently in order to achieve some efficiencies. So I wanted to share with you that a lot of that work's going on.
And I encourage my board members, if you have ideas, send them to staff. I know Glenn loves to receive all my ideas, and I have a lot of them. Dr. Eng?
Yeah, quick question about the line item for environmental/ADA. Can you clarify specifically what qualifies to pull money from that pool, that money?
So, first of all, the additional funding that we will be putting in this line item, we will utilize to hire additional staff because we're understaffed. We don't have enough people to do the work that needs to be done. So we want to position ourselves to be more proactive than reactive, being ahead of things. So that will involve being more aggressive in terms of responding to work orders and complaints. Trying to get ahead of things as opposed to being, again, behind the 8 ball. And this category involves all kinds of things. ADA is a component of it too. We utilize this category, for example, here's a great example, when we do a playground. And if it's not ADA accessible, we'll use some of this fund to increase the sidewalk accessibility to a site. So anything involving accessibility issues, it could also involve lifts in schools as well. But it's the ADA and environmental component, mold, mildew, asbestos, lead, anything that, air quality that could be of concern. We will be looking, and we're okay to do this, we check with the county. We'll be looking to, again, add probably a couple, 3 additional staff members to do this. And the way this is really set up, the funding resides in the CIP, but the work is done by staff and maintenance and operations. So that's kind of how it's set up.
So once again, you're saying that that money will go towards paying people?
A couple of people, 3 people, because we need the staff to position ourselves to be more aggressive in responding and more responsive
But also, that there's costs in actually doing those structural changes.
Yes, and then
that's also going into that.
Yes,
that line item.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
So just by way of clarification, if you look at what they've presented, they've actually created 2 line items. So you have the debt-funded line item and the cash-funded. And so as I understand it, anything that'd be related to personnel and staffing would come out of the cash-funded line item, whereas...
We have some flexibility.
And you have some flexibility, but you're not taking staffing money out of the debt-funded because of the restrictions on the debt-funded money.
And if you look closely, when you get into the outer years, that environmental ADA line item under the cash-funded line item goes away because after the bond, we're able to shift it up into the debt-funded category.
Okay. So just the follow-ups I've gone through the document, I see the changes to the security line item, the devices line item, the environmental ADA item, and the, creation of the cash-funded in addition to the debt-funded item. I think, if I'm reading it correctly, I also saw some changes to SNAP. They were kind of modest.
We may have made some minor changes to round some things out.
The fiscal 27 numbers set, had to work it so that it remained in that.
To keep everything balanced on the back end. Okay. Because I was curious, in some of our correspondence, we talked about some priority projects that it sounded like we might be able to address. I think you recommended in your email we could address them through SNAP or PRIMP. I'll just give the example, some of the repairs that were needed at Hunter Elementary. When I look at typically what we budget for a renovation, though, it does seem to be much larger than our PRIMP and SNAP budget. So can you speak to that?
We're trying to accrue some funding from some other areas, much like we did with land. So we're trying to accrue funding from other areas to get enough money. And you mentioned other SNAP projects, so just looming in the back of everybody's mind is Rock Quarry.
Yeah.
We have, I believe, finished the assessment, the study of that facility. It looks like whatever we do out there, we'll have to do in phases. And as we get that tightened up, we'll share that information with you all.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Presser.
Any other questions regarding the VIP executive summary? So for next steps, we are approving this?
It is on the action agenda for tonight.
Okay. Any concerns with it, so we're not surprising staff at the action agenda? Okay.
Action.
That was really quick. Thank you very much. We'll move on with our work session. There's a resolution, I believe.
So the next item is the resolution for the proposed bond referendum for this fall. This is standard language that we've used for years as we work through that with the county staff. And as you know, we need to request this funding from the county for them to put it on the bond. And I just jotted down a couple of numbers. Roughly, the entire ask, I think, is for $832 million, and the bond component is $680 million. And again, these numbers and this verbiage come to us from the county, and with the county, we're in conjunction on how we put this together. And this is also on the action agenda for tonight.
Sure. So, Mr. Strickland, could I get you to explain a little bit more? I know Ms. Lucas comes and visits sometimes. And
she's coming tonight.
Talks about this, okay. But just so everyone knows and understands, talk to us a little bit about the difference between that larger number that's in the resolution and the amount that we're specifically requesting that would be funded through the general obligation bonds.
So there are two ways to fund things. There are GO bonds, GO bonds, general obligation bonds, which are voted on by the public, and that's what will happen this fall. And then at other times, they will fund things through LOBs, which are limited obligation bonds that do not require a vote of the public. In this case, some of the effort will be GO or general obligation bonds, and then some of it will be cash. So they're funding that through both vehicles.
So that's why when you look at the resolution, board members will see two different numbers.
Correct.
It's just that the resolution is specifically talking about one of the many funding vehicles the county has available.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You took one of my questions, so I'll worry about that. Oh, Mr. Meter, sorry.
Well, I would just add to what Mr. Strickland shared. There are different interest rates associated with the general obligation bonds versus the limited obligation bonds. So the money, the county's money, and ultimately the board's acquisition capacity with general obligation bonds can go further because they're guaranteed by the financials of the county, whereas the limited obligation bonds are not. But there's a reason to go in both directions. And as Mr. Strickland pointed out, the GOBs require a referendum in the passage.
Mr. Strickland?
Just one other note. We work on this a lot with our county partners, and there's always the issue of how much. And so they have their own debt models, but I want to say here at the table that they have always been wonderful to work with. They are nothing but flexible and informative to our questions. I remember a couple of years ago, they were very flexible when we needed some help, but they have been great to work with, and Mark Cooney works with county staff closely, and it's a great process for us to follow. I just wanted to share that.
Dr. Jarrett?
Thank you for this. Two questions that kind of go together, I think. What percentage, how I've heard about this before, is that a lot of this bond will go for repairs and for renovation. What percentage of this is going to be for repair and renovation?
So, I didn't know you were going to ask that, but I do know these numbers because I've looked at them a lot, so thank you for throwing me that softball. If you look at, roughly speaking, the next 7 years, the majority of the money, 70% of it, of the money available for new construction and additions and renovations is about 70%. If you add in the funding in that 7-year period that we're going to spend on life cycle projects, which by their nature, they are existing schools, that goes up to 75%. That's of the funding that we have available for both new school projects and additions and renovations. That is purposeful, it is planned. We looked at things several years ago and realized that we needed to increase the intensity of our efforts on those existing schools, so that's what we're doing. So thank you for that question.
And the follow-up is, are there specific projects you can speak to as to, what kind of renovation, I want the public to understand what we mean by what renovations and repair, life cycle repairs would look like.
So what I think would be maybe most appropriate is to have us to come at a future facilities committee meeting where we can explain that in more detail. But listed here, you can see the list of existing schools, whether they are simple just additions or maybe major renovations, or in some cases entire replacements. But we can bring that. I'll put a plug in, Mr. Hershey. We're going to have a robust facilities committee meeting, which we're looking forward to. And so we won't have the information ready at that meeting, but we'll get it queued up for a future meeting.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Caulfield?
I just have a question in regards to, and maybe this is for our action item when we talk about it. When we ask for the bond, did we meet, I mean, obviously met with the county commissioners, but did they know that we were going to get approved for it with the other bond that we already have? Don't we have a certain credit rating limit that we have to go before they would even consider giving us this much more?
So we work hand in hand with the county staff to come up with a dollar amount that we can ask for, and that's in the resolution. If approved tonight, that will go to the county, I think, early May, and then that will start the process of the county placing the bond referendum on the ballot in the fall. So once we do that, the rest of that work is on them.
Part of the county's responsibility in this and expertise is looking at, based upon their revenues and cash flows and fund balance, how much debt capacity they can add during any particular period of time without putting any risk to their credit rating.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Ms. Lucas shared this at the last meeting and walked through all of this for us. Sorry, I didn't mean to repeat that, but for us.
And they're very careful with that analysis.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. Because a lot of this is going to be determined by the LGC and what they say you can and cannot borrow. And so that's ultimately what the conversation is about is, one, the LGC won't let you exceed that, but also the conversation about what we believe the county can reasonably support without putting themselves at risk, and ultimately what taxpayers will support as well.
So I think what I was asking is, does the county know that the LGC will, that it's a possibility that we can do that with what we already have out there?
Well, what I would say is that they are very clear on what their debt capacity is, and so I don't know what kind of conversations that the county government has with the LGC, but my experience has been they're pretty clear on what that is, and they're not going to go and ask the LGC to do something that they know our debt capacity won't allow us to do. But, Ryan, you may be able to speak to county governments and the LGC and what they ask for, but that's been my experience.
And I would just add my experience in working with Emily for the last 10 plus years, and even her predecessor. They take the counties, not Wake County Board of Education, but the county's debt ratings extremely seriously. They will do their homework.
So if I can follow up. The reason I was asking is, well, I guess part two of the question would be, does the LGC determine if we can or how much we can? Like, in other words, if they say, well, we're not going to approve this, what happens to that bond or ask? I'm just trying to understand where the line is drawn. When does it then become that the taxpayers may have the burden?
So if I may, the LGC, Local Government Commission, generally follows it's not a fixed formula, but it's very definite criteria. So they'll look at the necessity and purpose of the bond. They'll look at the financial feasibility, the county's ability, based on its revenues, to repay a bond. So for example, this bond that we're putting forward this year might be less than what we put forward in the last bond, but some of that might be based on currently what we saw with the county revenues at our joint meeting. So these are things that can all be predicted, and in consultation with the county staff, the fiscal staff, and the folks that serve on the CIP, and they can project basically these are the guidelines that the LGC has set, so let's bring a proposal that kind of falls within those. There's not a lot of, it's discretionary, but it's also kind of very, I think, formula-driven. Is that fair to say? I know they look at things, tax impact, they look at, projected interest rates, and there's always a little bit of guesswork with where interest rates might go, but they've been pretty conservative.
They have, and in 20 or so years, I've only seen one circumstance, and it wasn't the county's issue, where what they were seeking was not achievable, and that was a result of the Great Recession when the debt markets collapsed. So lenders were just not lending money. So that was not anything based on what was projected or the LGC. But in 20 years, I've never seen, with that exception, any issue.
I would say traditionally where we've seen negative LGC actions have been with smaller units of government, particularly ones where they've had some issue of mismanagement, either an inability to pay bonds, default on a bond, or they've had an issue with like a town manager, for example, without naming specific locations. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that Wake has not historically had any issues, but we do have clients for which the trip to the LGC is a lot more fingers crossed and hoping it'll be approved.
And I think that hits right at the core that it's about the revenue that a county can raise. So if we think about, I think the lowest county raise maybe $94,000 per 1 cent of property tax. For Wake County, that might be $4 or $5 or $6 million. So they'll specifically look at what capacity you have, and they will limit you and won't let you go beyond that.
I'm sorry, just one more thought. If we ask for this bond and it goes for, and we already know that like the county is strapped, everybody's strapped, and we keep hearing that, at what point would it then become something that the taxpayers, that it would affect them, that we didn't have enough revenues coming in to actually pay it back, that it would fall on the taxpayers?
So the bond will be on the ballot for the voters to determine yay or nay. I think the first step for this is to pass the resolution highlighting what our needs are, and then it's up to the county to determine when they'll have public inputs. It's a process that they'll go through, but once we've done our job of passing the resolution, the county has accepted and passed a resolution to ensure it's on the ballot, then it's up to the voters, and we can't have conversations with the county about this. It's up to the voters and those agencies that will go out and advocate for the bond. So,
Aren't we advocating for the bond by asking for it in a resolution?
We're stating our needs.
Correct.
We're stating our needs.
and right now, there's a lot of schools that are in dire need of renovations. So I think it's showing the public the needs of why we're choosing to put a bond on. And it's not like a school bond is every year, it's every 4 years. The last time a bond was on was in 2022. And if my memory serves correctly, I believe Ms. Lucas said that bond had to be paid down by a certain amount in order for another bond to be put forth with Mr. Nieder. So he's giving me the thumbs up that my memory is accurate today. So we just have to do our job, is to pass this resolution to state what our needs are, and then allow the county in the process to play out the way it should. Because if we don't pass this bond, another bond would not go forth for another, till 2030, I think, would be the next 4 years. I'm sorry?
We'll get the money, it'll just cost us more.
Right, well, that's true. Any other comments or questions? All right.
No, I was, we were done.
Quicker than I anticipated.
This will be on the action agenda for later this evening.
Yes.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
I'm sorry. When we asked for a bond first, I don't know, it just seems a little weird that we're asking for something that's so open-ended. Because if I remember the last time, we were going to ask for the bond, and then we'll figure out what we can put in there later on. Like, will we have a list of XYZ?
We do.
And then it paid, okay. So we just don't see that. You just know that that's.
Well, this is
what
in the
total-
CIP, and this document helps the county cash flow both the current proposed bond and future expenditures as well.
So when we ask for the bond and it passes in November, will we have an ongoing list, like a monthly list that says, hey, this is the amount of money and this is what we're spending it on? Where's the checks and balances that all the money?
It's a drawdown process. Once a bond is passed, we submit invoices for projects, and then the county reimburses us. So it's a monthly, and it could be more frequently than monthly, but it's a drawdown process.
Mr. Strickland, don't you present to the board an annual plan for what the CIP funds will be used for?
Well, that's the executive summary, which we are considering tonight.
The costs to the board for approval.
And that's that bigger, thicker document that you see that you bring.
No, I understand that we have the list. It's just that it's such a broad list. It's not really like telling the public exactly where their dollars are being spent, is what I mean.
Which I think the CIP does highlight what the needs and where the dollars are going. And it's in Assembly, which lays out what the needs are year by year. And so, I mean, I think that's just very transparent in my opinion. But I'm just one person.
Just to follow up, what we have always done, what we will continue to do, is after this gets approved, we will share our building program plan with the public. So it will be posted on the website with the projects that have been approved and what the request is like. Is that what you're asking, Ms. Coughlin?
Yeah, just to have like accountability checks and balances, like because there are some times when we get funds in, and then our priorities shift, or something changes. We talk about the fund balance all the time, like it's all different changes there. So we know that we got money that came in for COVID funds, for example, and we put a lot of it towards salaries. You know, we didn't put it towards HVAC, and now here we're answering questions on a daily basis about HVAC, so I'm just trying to find out where's the accountability that we're going to spend this money specifically on brick and mortar.
I do have to address that, because we did spend money on HVAC, and I can show you the documentation.
I know we
But I take
did,
your bigger
but
point.
not at the level that the public felt. So I'm saying, just for clarity, do we have this checks and balances to show the public, hey, look, here's the money we got, and we're spending it. Your brick and mortar is now being repaired, where we weren't able to do it before. This money has helped us do it like that way. I think it's a fair question that if the taxpayers are paying it, it adds clarity.
Let me address that to Mr. Malone. Mr. Malone, when the county issues a bond, doesn't there have to be a publicly available document that goes through and lists, like, the purpose of the bond, the projects, the expenditures? We used to put them in newspapers, but I know there's not as much newspaper publishing these days. But isn't there that public notice requirement?
So that's a great question. When I've talked to bond counsel, I don't think that the bond question is normally not so limiting that the projects that you stated you're going to use the money on, that you literally are wedded to those projects. So there is a little flexibility in the way that the question is typically put on the ballot, but normally there is a very clear document that explains how the board is planning to spend the money.
And that's the distinction, right, between the ballot question, which is more general,
Correct.
and this longer public document that
Correct.
is on file.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's also listed in the CIP as well that Mr. Carosa is holding up.
Yeah, so all of the money that we're spending on new schools and renovations is clearly identified for the bond, 2 years of this bond money. The only schools that may receive renovations that are not listed are anything that would fall under PRIMP or SNAP. And those are presentations that staff will bring to the board for approval before we move forward with any of those particular projects. So we will be transparent and open about every single project that this bond money will be used for with regards to renovations or brand-new buildings for schools.
So it assures that all of us are being good stewards with the public's dollars. There's transparency, there's conversations about it, and we are the accountable body. We are the ones who approve the projects and give feedback based on concerns that we hear from the public. So that's where I think, again, that checks and balances is where it's the 9 of us at this table.
And if I may,
Go for it.
this is a little bit dated, I apologize, Lisa, I'm going back to some old stuff. But generally, with the building program and the bond campaign, we will post the total capital, the bond funding, we'll have an FAQ. Facilities design and construction page will often even have site maps and area maps of the specific areas of the projects. And then here, if you were interested in like very specific things, you'll see here, this was just for Briarcliff, the total amount of capital needed, the bond funding, any cash funding, and some of those dates. It has flexibility, right? Because like if you had a supply chain issue and you couldn't finish it by a certain date, you might have to go back and amend some of those dates. But a lot of this has traditionally been made available during the campaigns, and they keep it up after the campaign so you can track over the years like where these projects are. This one right here is, I mean, it's a crazy URL, but
Yeah, so we will redo that page. You all are in this process right now, and so we will redo that page. We're sharing information about our building program, not about the bond, but it's to create transparency about what those funds will be used for.
Mr. Hagerty, since you are the veteran board member, can you just walk us through the process that the board did, so therefore there's no more confusion with this process? Once the board approved the resolution in 2022.
yeah, it's just a sequence. This is the first step is the planning, which has been all the work that we've talked about with the CIP, the identification of specific projects. We'll go and we'll do the assessment financially of what we think is needed, and they've taken board input about things like renovation, how much we want to put in. Everything that you see on that CIP that says debt funded is in reference to bonds, okay? But then we have to have this resolution by a certain date to go through so that legally the county can begin the process of requesting the bond. Then, as we go closer, basically staff will come in and bring us details about specific projects. The last bond we did, there was a big question in terms of high schools between like Athens Drive and Cary High School. And so there was board discussion and debate, and in that particular bond, we had the funding for Athens Drive. And so now for this bond, we have the funding that's coming up for Cary High School. So when the campaign starts, there's this whole process that the county has to go through. You can go to the School of Government and look up just on their website. They'll go through the whole bonding process with the local government commission. There's flow charts that'll sort of show you the different steps that the local government commission considers in terms of, which route it has to go through the commission. And then they'll make this available, this information available publicly. You can get it from the county as the agency that's actually, putting their name on the bond. You can get these as public documents, the local government commission. And again, we put more plain English versions available on our website. I think the actual technical documents can get a little hard to read. I think what we do is we put together, I think, a much more clear version of what's in that bond package. And then the news media as well often do stories about exactly what is in the bond proposals, what it would be used for. The rules that we have on how we use money from bonded indebtedness are pretty tight. They have some flexibility, which has been referenced, but you can't just use it for anything, right? Again, that's the difference that we talked about with the environmental and ADA requirements. There's some things that are capital expenditures that would be debt funded, but you wouldn't do like salaries and personnel with bond money, right? Because that would be something that the bond money has to have something behind it, right? It's tied to an asset. And a building is an asset, property is an asset, but someone's position, someone's salary is not an asset that could be capitalized for the bond.
So if we had like contractors and architects and all those, we're not using bond money for that?
No, I'm sorry. We are for that, but we're not paying a WCPSS employee for the actual construction cost. When I said you're purchasing land, when you're building a building, the building doesn't get built without a contractor, right? What you pay the contractor might be supplies, it might be architecture and design, it might be the project management, it might be the girders. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go into the construction of the school. But that total school construction bill, you're going to see under the debt-funded line item, specifically in here for those schools that we've identified. And for some schools that are in the plan that we're projecting, it may not be specifically enumerated yet. You'll see elementary school to be determined 1, but we can plan knowing that our growth projects a need for that school, right? But by the time we're getting it into the bonds, we have to have more specificity about how we're going to divide up that pie.
Yeah, this bond may be paying for the design dollars for the future construction costs to come out of a future bond.
That's right, and we've seen that recently, right?
Thank you, Mr. Hager.
Thank you.
There's no more comments or concerns. This will be on action this evening. And again, this is just one part of many parts with this process. And thanks to the team and Mr. Strickland and your team for going back and raising and answering questions that we had. And we'll see you this evening on the other side of the room. So with that, Vice Chair Hershey?
Motion to go into closed sessions for the reasons stated on the agenda.
So there is a motion to go into closed session. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Gordon. Any discussion on the items? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of going to closed session, let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed, same signs. The ayes have it. We're in closed session.